All right. So we live in a one-bedroom apartment, and I was tired of moving my 80-pound saw around, moving this here, moving that there. I needed more room to store stuff, and bringing stuff out to the patio was a pain. So I started messing around with Inventor, and I made some basic plans and started a parts list. And I used dimensions from where I planned on keeping the workbench, and went off that, tried to keep it within those constraints. But things kept changing as I actually started building, and I had it in front of me, so you'll see all that. But first things first, I started with two 2 foot by 4 foot boards, 3/4 inches thick. I'd used these with my car storage platform, so I was comfortable with them being able to hold the weight of the saw and wheeling around and all that. I was comfortable with them. So I set up a spot on my patio, started trimming away to the size I needed. And I tried to be so careful with my saw to get 90-degree cuts to be able to reuse the little beams I was making, but it wasn't cutting at 90 degrees, so I had to freehand it a bit, and then I planned on sanding it down later. Finished the first board, sanded it down a bit. Then I used that first board to trace the second board on my second 2 foot by 4 foot. And then I did the same thing, cut it and sanded it. And I had made a table for behind our couch that we planned on using, but we decided, it still needs a lot of work and a lot of time and money, and I decided to just take it apart to use the 1.5 by 1.5 inch beams that were on there instead of buying new ones. So I measured and cut the beams to make one of the frames. I just lined it up the best I could, marked it with a pencil, and cut it. There's the finished first frame. And then I glued and screwed the frame into place. Try to keep it flush on all four corners. And on the last screw, this happened. And I was like, oh, great. Already off to one of these with this project. But it didn't happen again. Spoiler alert, it was a Harbor Freight screw, so maybe that has to do with it, but I've never seen that happen before. I just left it. I figured it was attached enough, whatever. Then I sketched out where I wanted to drill the holes for the caster wheels, and made sure that the screws and nuts fit, but there wasn't that much clearance, so I decided to get some 1.25 inch screws the next day. The ones in the picture are just 1 inch. Then I did the same thing with the second frame and the second board, glued and screwed, no issues there. And by the end of day one, I had both boards and frames done, and I cut up the height beams while there was still some daylight, because I don't like, you saw, I'm on an apartment patio. I don't like cutting past 5 p.m. It gets loud, so I called it there for that day. All right, day two. So, sorry, I did lie. The second day, I glued and screwed the second frame because I was out of screws, those Harbor Freight screws. So I went and got those, glued and screwed that frame. I'd already cut those height beams the day prior, but I kind of rushed it. So I lined them all up, and I wanted to make sure that they were exactly the same length, so I cut them to the same length. Then I attached the height beams to the first board. I used my patio table, some wood, and note cards, and I wanted to make sure that the screw wouldn't push the beam away and leave like a gap. That's why I had like the note cards and the wood on the floor there, so everything was snug as is, so I could really push down and make sure that nothing separated. And I used weights on the other side so I could push down on the side I was screwing, and it would like kind of counteract it. And this is what happens when you put 30 pounds of weight on one side and then stop pushing on the other side. Everything tips over, fun fact. So I finished the first 4 height beams, and then I started attaching them to the second board the same way. Obviously, it was a lot easier because now they were actually attached to something, so I could push down on them rather than note cards and wood. Yeah, that's it. All done, all connected. I tried out the new 1.25-inch screws I got for the caster wheels, which had a bit more clearance, so I was happy with those. I attached all the caster wheels, and yeah, rolling it around. It works. But I decided that there wasn't a lot of support to push the cart around. If you can picture like an 80-pound saw on top and wheeling it around, there's just 8 screws holding in those height beams, and I didn't think that it would hold that well. So I plan to make some support beams that screw into the frame and into the height beam on all the corners. And I changed up my Inventor blueprint a bit to help visualize what I was planning on doing. But yeah, I ended day 2 there with just a few things left to do, a few more cuts, few more screws. But yeah, overall, I was pretty happy with the progress. All right, so day 3. So I started cutting the support beams that I had just added in the Inventor blueprint, but instead of going with like very square, boxy look to them, I figured I might as well put 45-degree angles on all of them, clean it up a bit. And yeah, same as the last few days. I started gluing and screwing, and they screwed down through the frame into the board, which I was happy about. And not too long later, they were all done. Just a lot of waiting on glue to dry because I only have 4 clamps. And I don't think they look half bad, and they definitely help the structural integrity. I could feel a difference in the rigidity of it, just as is. And now it was time to drill the holes for the saw to mount to. And once I measured them and drilled them out, I checked the clearance with the bolts I got, and I was happy with it. So I threw fender washers and regular washers on the bottom of all of them with some lock nuts. And the reveal, there we go. I'm going to keep my shop vac and sander on the bottom because when the top part is finished, I want as much weight as I can near the bottom so it's not top heavy in any way. And here's where it'll stay most of the time. I wanted it to fit my saw and everything else eventually, but I also didn't want it to have a bigger footprint than my toolbox because, again, 1-bedroom apartment, not a lot of room. That's the entrance to the apartment. That's right by the front door. So, but yeah, I have a few things I want to change off camera eventually. I want to add some washers and nuts to the underside of the saw to help just hold it all. But again, it feels very snug right now, but I just want the extra insurance. It's not hard to do. I just don't have the parts right now. I'm going to sand down some of the edges, obviously. I'm thinking about getting another locking caster just because why not? When I bring it outside, I should have more than just one wheel locked. If anything, I'll just do 2 corners. And here is the plan for the top half, an Inventor. I want to have it removable for when I wheel like the saw outside. And I have a pretty clever idea on how to secure it. Stay tuned for part 2. Obviously, it'll look a little different from this blueprint. I still have to add the support beams, the ones with the 45 degrees on them, and anything else that comes up along the way, because I'm sure stuff will. But yeah, subscribe for when I make the second part. If you need another woodworking fix, check out when I made this car storage platform. I did that with less tools and less money, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. But yeah, I read and respond to all comments. Hopefully you found this video quality, and take care.